is from University of Waterloo. Before getting here, though, he did an advanced diploma in game programming at George Brown College. Then he was here and did his BS in physics with a focus in astrophysics. He then left physics, though I assume his heart never left, but went to Gameloft Toronto, spent a little over 5 years writing mobile games there. I'm sure he's going to tell us a lot about what games and how that went and all that goes into it. And recently now he's working at Unity Technologies, who makes a game engine. And take it away, Andy.
All right, cool. Let's try to share my screen here. Where was this again?
Right beside the leave button, it should be.
Right beside the leave button. Oh, the dots. Wait, no. This worked last time.
I know. It's maybe it's something different.
Should be like a rectangle with an up arrow in it. They've changed all the icons in like the last.
Okay, here we go. Cool, perfect. That was easy.
Too used to how it works and then be comfortable online. So okay, good.
Okay, perfect. And I want to see the chat. Perfect. Okay, so if you guys have any questions while I'm presenting, feel free to just throw it into the chat and I'll try to look over on my other screen and answer it. So physics and game programming, this is basically just me talking about myself, which is not something I really like doing, but let's give it a shot. So I graduated in 2015 from University of Waterloo, and I graduated from George Brown in 2013. And some of these numbers may not make sense to a lot of you, because how did I graduate in 2 years? Which is the complicated part, which I'll get into a little bit. And like you said, I worked at Gameloft for 5 years. I work at Unity. In high school, I learned how to program pretty early on in Visual Basic 6, if anybody knows that. Did a bunch of C++. And I was really heavy into the STEM courses. And I gamed in my free time, made a lot of websites, did a lot of art. And at this point, I was kind of like, oh, what am I going to do with my life? And I was like, yeah, you know, I like science. Science is pretty awesome. Well, let's go to Waterloo. Like, science is super cool. I remember my friends saying, like, having classes in physics. They're like, oh, wow, this is so cool. I'm going to miss this when I leave. And I'm like, well, I'm not, because that's what I'm going to go do. Math was fun. You could do so much with it. Like, I'm going to explain in some game stuff. And I like making things and making experiments. There's the one question in the sin bin, which was this resistor cube thing. And I was like, this is cool. Let's try making that, you know, like, to see if it works. And real life is a little bit more messy than that, because the resistors I ordered were rated at 12 ohms, and all of them measured in at 15.3. So you can calculate everything all you want, but in real life, things don't usually work out that way, which is really important, because you have to make sure to do tests and experiments and measure things properly, which is hopefully what you guys are learning in school. So some of my favorite classes when I was in Waterloo were like Comp Phys, right? With Professor Yavik, doing C++. We're doing some graphing. A lot of the times, the assignments don't make a lot of sense. So you kind of just try to hack it out, and then in the end you get a really nice picture like this, and you're like, wow, okay, this is awesome. So I encourage you guys to like take some of those classes, because I really like those. So basically this is where my like story kind of happened in Waterloo. By the time I got to second year, I'm sure you guys all know it gets like really tough, and you're like kind of slogging through assignments all the time. And a lot of people kind of hit a low point. Some people are okay with it. And I was kind of like in the middle. I was like, oh God, what can I do? And then I learned you could go to school to make video games. Honestly, this thought like never crossed my mind. I like it wasn't even on the radar when I was like in high school. I was just like, all right, cool. Like, you know what? I like making video games and I like playing video games, but I also like math and science and stuff. Okay, let's go do physics and stuff. So I was like, what? You can make video games? And I found a program at George Brown specifically for that. And it was actually the first year this program was offered. When I took it, when I left in my second year in Waterloo, I didn't drop out or anything. I kind of just like took a break. So basically, like I felt like I was missing something creatively doing physics. Like a lot of it's very abstract. You're kind of just like slogging through equations, and then sometimes with like the programming stuff, you could do some neat stuff, or like if you're doing your labs, you can make some nice diagrams and stuff like that. But like the burnout is real. And we all kind of knew at the time where it's like hard to find jobs in general. Like a lot of my friends were like, oh yeah, like, you know, it's not something we're really worried about. So, but that was always like in the back of my mind, and just like dead. So off to George Brown. Took a break. There's a lot of forms and stuff that you could actually sign that says like, oh, you're taking a break for these reasons, and blah blah blah, and then you could come back like later on. So it wasn't really a problem with that. So I go to George Brown, do some game programming. For some reason, George Brown just has a ton of money for all these like wicked computers and stuff. So that was pretty neat. And you get to learn a lot of new stuff. Like you get to learn programming, you get to learn AI. You have courses on production, which I'll get a little bit more into, and then like math in parentheses. Coming from Waterloo, you could get a lot of exemptions for all the math courses and physics courses, so easy credits. And then all the stuff that comes with programming, data structures and algorithms. You learn some game physics stuff, which is really cool. Graphics programming, which is also super cool, and it's right up our alley as physicists, to be honest. And then you kind of learn how to like make game engines, like organize things properly, input, like all the little nitty gritty stuff. And then something that's also super cool is because they had a bunch of money to throw around. They had like mobile devices, they had development consoles, and like this stuff is like really key on like kind of getting into the industry, because like unless you know how to do it, then you don't really know how to do it. So how can you get a job doing it? And then you get to make games. You get to make a ton of games, which is the best part. So like some of the stuff that I did while I was there, C# XNA was still a thing, which isn't really a thing anymore. But like you can make like little phone apps. So I made there's this game called Lights Out, which I'm not sure if anybody knows, and I kind of took that and expanded it to 3D. So that was fun. You can make some Mastermind. I made a Mastermind clone, so it's just like little games. It probably only takes like a week or two to make. Oh, come back. And like I made like a Missile Command clone, and then basically within these projects, the amount of effort you put into them is like the amount of like quality that you get out, right? So I kind of just use these projects to try out new things, do graphics like API from like the code level, and just like learn everything like low level. And then you can make you could start cloning games, which is basically how I started. You don't always have to kind of like make up your own idea. I like this game. It's a game called Wario's Woods, and I was like, cool, let's try making that. I basically opened up an emulator, went frame by frame, got all the movements exactly timed. You could find all the sprites online, so you could make an animation system. Mine was probably far too complicated for what it was, but you could key in all the frames and effects and stuff inside of like an Excel spreadsheet, and just like go and do this stuff. So that's cool. And all of this stuff adds to your portfolio in the end. So you get to use all this stuff. One of the projects in first year at the end of our graphics programming course was either make a scene in OpenGL or write a ray tracer. So I was like, cool, writing a ray tracer sounds super fun, right? Like you could do like this is all done just like with ray shape intersections. And you could add lights to your scene, and you could add shapes, and you could add material properties like making things shiny or making it not shiny, and then you could add textures if you wanted to. So I was like, wow, this is awesome, right? And I encourage you guys to like give this a shot if you guys have time or if you're interested in this. And then next steps for this, after you've made like a simple ray tracer, you can make a path tracer, or you can make a ray marcher. You could add refraction and light transport, so you could go through objects and give them like refraction and make like, I'm sure you'll see, like I have a slide here coming up. You could add textures to all of these things. So you could give it a shot. Here's some of the sites that I use. Real-time rendering intersections just basically gives you some code to intersect with different shapes. Take a look at Shadertoy, because this site is awesome. This is a screenshot of Shadertoy on the bottom, where there's just tons and tons of examples that you could run inside of your web browser, and you could see all the code that they've done. And you could pick it apart, you could edit it, you could change it. You could just take it and like fly and do your own thing. So it's like super, super cool. And then some of the other games I made was like one of our assignments was to make Street Fighter in Flash. So you get to learn a lot of stuff like setting up animations and states to do like combos. You could do collision systems. So like you could add bounding boxes to like their hands and stuff when they attack, and make sure that those like only hit them once, because it'll intersect with them every single frame. So you got to add logic in there to not like hit them a billion times as you're punching. So this is like super fun. Like if I could have made this like back in like the early 2000s and put this up on like Newgrounds, it would have been like 10 million downloads. But like all of this stuff, like there's all these resources and things online that you could just take, cut up, make your own games. It's awesome, honestly. And also my first year using Flash made a physics engine. So some of the features it has like n-gon sided collisions. So you could have any type of polygon and it'll have perfect collisions. And then you could add circles, because circles are like a little special case. Added some splines, because originally I made this for one of our classes. They wanted to make a Sonic clone. Right? So it's like, all right, splines, right? Because he has to run up and down hills and stuff like that. And this was just like the designers being like way too ambitious, and it just never happened. But I'll show you what it turned into. So you could add restitution and friction, and you could do like all these crazy things. And then the game engine-y stuff, so you have collision callbacks, so you could add callbacks to certain shapes that will do certain things like hurt your character or cause an explosion or whatever, right? So I want to like also kind of talk about some of the math, I guess, for you guys here. So the way the collision system works is it uses the separation of axis theorem. Basically what you could do is you could project all the points of the shapes that you're trying to test onto a plane, and you'll usually choose a couple different planes to be like the sides of the shapes and maybe the plane of motion. And then if they don't intersect at any point, so like here at the bottom, you automatically know that they're not touching, right? See here you have an overlap in this projection. So like, okay, I don't know if it's colliding yet. So you go pick another plane and you go, okay, they haven't collided. They're only colliding when there's no plane that has any like space in between it. And then this can be expanded to like 3D. I added some links here, so I could probably share this slide with you guys if you want to go and try this stuff out. It's really cool. There's so much to learn, honestly. But yeah, you could probably knock that out in like 2 or 3 weeks if you really tried. It's pretty fun. You learn a lot. So this is kind of what that game engine turned into. Part of our production classes in George Brown, we work with the different game development programs inside of George Brown. So they have us, the programmers, they have post-grad design class, and then they have an art stream that's divided into animation and modeling. and like 2D art, I guess, right? So basically, once a week, we'd all get together. The artists would make all these art assets. The programmers made the engine, and the designers came up with the game. And George Brown got this deal with Toonbox, which was making this nut job movie, which ended up coming out like 2 years after this, which is the screenshot in the bottom left. But like you actually kind of learn how to like manage your time. There's a question. How do you fix the overlap without intersection problem? You basically just test all the different, you test multiple planes, and then if any one of those tests don't have an overlap, then you know that the shapes aren't overlapping. But yeah. So yeah, you actually get to do some like real life stuff. And I'm gonna say real life loosely, is because this fountain is shooting fire out of it. And a designer asked me how they can animate this. I'm like, cool, you could just do this, right? I'm like, but you know what? You should change that to like water and make it look better. And then they just committed that, and that's how it made it into the game. So, fun stuff. Here's some of the other games that we did. The game on the left is called Escape. So we made this in second year with the production class, and it's basically like a first-person kind of puzzle game. Which had like 4 different levels. This is the end boss of the game, which is like a computer. You're basically trapped in a computer and you have to like escape, which is why it's called Escape. I thought it was pretty clever. And you have this gun that you could shoot onto these floppy disks on the wall that like when they connect through different rooms, it opens up a wall and whatever, right? And then this is a project that I did in third year with some of the design students called Crokinole, which is actually like a real life board game that was invented in Canada like 200 years ago or something like that. But we got to make it on the iOS, added some AI opponents that you could play against. You could do pass and play. And then through the Apple thing, you could do like turn-based with friends and stuff like that. And this was like ages ago. And then one of my my projects that I like doing in my spare time was I was trying to write an engine. Every game programmer always wants to write an engine, and it never turns out great. But this is kind of what I did. I kind of wanted to make like it was a learning project too, right? So I wrote my own networking code, did these animations by hand inside of 3D Studio Max, and kind of just like threw this thing together. And doing this sort of stuff, you actually learn a lot. So basically, like, what did I learn from George Brown? I basically got the time to work on things that I thought was interesting and try making new stuff. I got time to experiment with like my game engine, network code, making stuff for mobile phones, making things on the Xbox, and basically just 3 years of trying like all this crazy stuff. And one of the most important things was making connections in the industry, because you get to work with all these people, and then once these people graduate, the game industry is actually pretty tight knit. It's smaller than you think. I have friends working at Ubisoft and like EA, and I'm sure I'll probably work with them again at some point. Everybody moves around a lot, and you make new friends. Some of my best friends I met in George Brown, and I work with now, and we still talk and chat and play games daily. Well, not daily, like weekly. And you get some real world experience, which is also super, super important, because when you want to go get a job, you have to have experience before you get experience, right? I have some slides on that, on how to network without going to a program like George Brown. So I'll wait to answer that one. So I graduated from George Brown, and it's like, now what? All right, let's go back to Waterloo, right? Let's finish what I started. And I figured out that it's all basically just problem solving. Like, you have to just solve the next problem. Like, how do you get grades? Well, you do the assignments, and the assignments have problems on them, so solve those problems. And then you get to learn how tests relate to assignments, and then you get to learn how to study for tests. And basically you learn how to learn, which is like the most important skill. If you take anything away from school, learn how to learn, because you'll never stop learning. You just got to keep learning, because there's things that you're not going to be taught in school that you're going to have to figure out on your own. So some of my favorite classes here in third and fourth year was like astronomy. So I had Professor Hudson and Professor Broderick for Phys 475, 375. Labs were also super cool because you get to like actually measure the speed of light, which when you get into some inner arguments sometimes, it's like, have you actually measured the speed of light? And I'm like, yes, yes, I have. But these classes were really, really fun because when I went back to Waterloo, it was like more math, and I pretty much stopped coding at that point because, like physics assignments are hard. So now I had assignments to do coding. I was like, super cool, right? You get to do numerical integration, graphing. You get all this data that you got to read into your program, analyze that data, which is basically kind of what you're doing with labs, but you can like write programs that do that. And like, honestly, like computation is the future. Like it's 2021. You have giant supercomputers doing stuff. It's kind of something that you need to learn. And if you guys haven't learned latex yet, learn that, because that's super awesome. Okay. Writing your labs, it's just everything looks better. And you can write, like, these are some of the graphs I made when I was doing assignments and projects in school. And like once you get that done, it looks like super pretty and you're like super happy with yourself, and makes everything just a little bit better at the end of the day, for me at least. Oh yeah, there you go. Phys Clubs, Python, and latex workshops. Go to those. So this is something I kind of just like whipped up the other day using Unity. This runs in real time on the GPU. It's only like 2 files of code. You could read in an image, spawn a bunch of particles, do some simple, like super, super simple, like gravity force, like numerical integration, and just get some really cool stuff like going on. Like I wish this technology was available back when I was in school, because it wasn't quite there yet. So I'm kind of jealous that you guys have like this is all done in Unity, by the way, Unity 2020.2. So you guys should play around with that because it's super awesome. And this is just like one day, and like one day of work. Imagine what you could do, like actual like real physics simulations. Hopefully it doesn't look too compressed on your end. But yeah, so now when I graduated, I had a physics degree and I had a game programming degree, and it feels like a superpower. Like it's almost not fair. Just because physics, especially Waterloo, I have like a funny anecdote here. When I was doing labs in third year, there was a exchange student from Scotland as my lab partner. And one day he asked me, he's like, how do you guys do it? I'm like, do what? He's like, the assignments. There's so many assignments. I'm like, wait, what do you mean? Like, you guys don't do this many assignments like back in Scotland? And he's like, no. I was like, wow. I'm like, what the hell? But if you guys can make it through, it's like, I'm not saying that everything's easier. It's like you're just used to doing that work. And if you could continue that pace in like a real job, then you're like a god. So I graduated and I got to go to Gameloft, and that's me, and that's my best friend that I met, George Brown. Both hats are mine. And I got to work on games like Uno. So when I went back to Waterloo, I had my friend do all the hard work and go find a job. And then when I finished Waterloo, I was like, hey, can you get me a job at Gameloft? And he's like, sure. So I started on Uno as a game programmer, and basically did like anything that needed to be done. Worked on graphics, worked on audio bugs, putting music in the game, setting up audio, worked on ads because that made us all our money. We had controller support at some point, even though it was a mobile game. Worked on the data pipeline because we have a bunch of assets and stuff that need to get converted for Android, iPhone, PC, like all this stuff. And it was really fun working on that because we got to do a lot of like movie tie-ins. We had Ghostbusters, which was awesome because we got to see a bunch of the content before the movie was actually released. And then some things that were kind of like questionable, like Monster High and My Mini Mix-A-Q's, they're all like Mattel products. So we kind of just like got all these IPs and stuff to throw in our game. And then after a year or two of that, we started a new game, which just got released last year called Lego Legacy Heroes Unboxed. We used our own like in-house game engine to do this, which I got to like contribute to, which was a lot of fun. And it looks amazing. You could look at some of these trailers online. But basically, I kind of worked on graphics and animation. I worked on the asset pipeline. I fixed the automatic build pipeline. I did a bunch of server-side features. Basically, like handled all the in-app purchase stuff in the in-game store. Fixed engine bugs. And oh, that's there twice. Okay, whoops. Anyway, there's lots. There's like so much to do. Like making games is hard. So basically, what goes into making a game? You have game managers and producers. You have designers designing the game. You have programmers programming the game. You have UX designers designing menus and how people actually interact with the game and like move from screen to screen. You have QA that has to test the game. You have narrative that writes the story. You have artists that have to make the art. You have the animators that have to animate the art. You have UI artists. You have product managers, data analysts, community managers. Like that's just the game team, because then you have external studios, which will make the engine, will make the libraries that go into the game, do all the server-side stuff. We have to have localization, so we have people all around the world taking all of our content and localizing it for every single country that we're releasing in. We have more QA teams, we have tracking, and then what I call noise is you have like a bunch of external companies you got to deal with. So like Lego and Mattel, and then they have their IP that they want to protect. So you can't make it, you have to make it the way they want it. Because we also worked on a Disney game, and at one point we were working with Johnny Depp, and Johnny Depp holds the character property, and it has to look a certain way. So it has to look that way in our game. And then we have all these compliancy stuff that we got to comply with, like GDPR and COPPA, which says you can't like advertise to children and stuff like that. Then you have users and reviews and influencers and social media. And honestly, it's so complicated. But that's how you make games, and it takes years. So some things you can do. There's meetups that you could go to. Like in Toronto, there used to be like a monthly meetup. You guys might have to like wait a year until things kind of get a little bit more relaxed. There's an electronic gaming convention that used to happen every year in Toronto, which had a lot of panels that had a lot of indie developers and developers that would come and talk. So you could talk and ask them questions, and you could try to make your own games. There's a bunch of game jams you could do. There's the Global Game Jam, which is still happening. Basically, you can make your game and then submit it online, and then a bunch of people can play your games. You can play other people's games. And basically what a game jam is like you have like 3 days to make a game. So they'll start the event, and then you try to get a team, or you can work individually and just like make a game. Toe Jam used to happen in Toronto, which is the same thing, but locally. So you'd go there, usually to the venue. So that's a good thing to do. That probably will start up in the next year again. You could go to Reddit. There's a bunch of different Reddit channels. You could go to Our Game Dev. They have a Discord channel that you could kind of go to. There's another subreddit called True Game Dev, because once you kind of like get into the game dev thing, you could kind of see that like the people on game dev a lot of them don't know what they're doing, which is, it's just fine. But it's Reddit, so there's like a 1.5 billion subreddits that you could go to. So how do you get a job in games? I don't know. I just pulled up some random stuff. So this is a Overwatch gameplay engineer. Having a portfolio really helps, which is kind of what really helped with going to George Brown, because you have a bunch of games that you could show and that you've kind of like done stuff. But like passion for making games, cool. Yeah, okay, we all got that. Gameplay engineer experience, it depends, right? It depends how much you've done. Strong C++ programming skills. A lot of people may not have that, but like one thing we do have in spades as physicists is strong math skills, right? Like, and that really does help. So that gives us a huge leg up. And honestly, with going to Waterloo, you kind of have the pressure aspect of making games in check too, because us doing assignments and tests and exams and stuff like that. And here's my job that I used to have at Gameloft. So ability to meet tight deadlines, yep. Ability to work independently under pressure, yeah, we all got that. Some of the things we don't have, you guys may not have, is this experience with like iOS and stuff. But if you have an iOS or Android device, you could pretty much make games on that at home if you wanted to, and you could learn. So that's another thing you guys can do. But yeah, it's tough. It's a toss up. Another thing that a lot of people don't really expect with this kind of industry, game industry, and like programming industry in general, designers also have to do a bunch of tests. Here's a quote from the CEO of Stack Overflow. It says, "Would you hire a magician without asking them to do some magic tricks?" And like, of course not. You want to test the caterer's food and stuff like that. So basically, whenever you're applying for a job, you have to do a programming test. When I went to Gameloft, it was a 3-hour programming test before you even had an interview. When I went to Unity, it was the same. I think it was a take-home test that they sent me. They emailed me and said, like, all right, are you ready for a test? Here you go. And then within 3 hours, they email you back and says, okay, we need the test back. And they're not always programming. Sometimes they're like short answer questions, like how to do the cross product. Why do graphics render geometry forward to backwards, forwards, like all this stuff, right? And there's also a lot of controversy in this because once you've been programming for like 10 years, a decade, 20 years, some of the questions they ask you are like things that you don't really use in the industry, like merge sort. Nobody's writing merge sort these days. It's all these things are implemented already, and then they ask you this question and you don't know how to do it, and then you don't get the interview. So it's tough. When I was applying for some of these jobs, and I get a call, and I tell my girlfriend, I'm like, oh yeah, I have a call. She's like, oh, you got an interview? I'm like, no, it's just a call. And then that call turns into a test, and then I'm like, okay, I got to take 3 days off work to study. And then you do the test, and then if you do the test well enough, then you get an interview, and it's honestly exhausting. So what are some things that you could do to learn? Download Visual Studio, try some C# or C++, or learn Python, or learn all of them. Project Euler is a really cool site because it has a bunch of like questions where it's like, find all the prime numbers and from 1 to 1,000,000, or there's a bunch of like all these really fun questions, problems. And these often are the types of questions that you have to do in tests when doing interview tests. So they're pretty good to do. HackerRank is very similar to Project Euler. Download some game engines, like Unity is pretty awesome. Unreal is a little bit more advanced and probably a little bit tough to jump into right away, but you could download that. There's tutorials for all of these things online. You could do YouTube tutorials, or you could go to learn.unity.com and they have like little tutorials and things that you could do there. And Google is your friend, like always. Like honestly, there's not a programmer out there that doesn't use Google. Like sometimes it's easier just to copy some code for something simple than it is to actually like write it out yourself. some really cool things that aren't really games, that are kind of like emerging technologies, or like machine learning, AI, computer vision. So like reconstructing 3D data from different images. AI and machine learning are like all over the place in the industry right now, where they could reconstruct human skeletal poses and stuff like that, all just from AI, and it's used in games, and not only in games, it's used in like film, like apps like Snapchat and stuff like that, and it's like kind of like cutting edge right now. So if that's something that interests you, like I bought these are some books that I bought in the last 6 months just to try to like get ahead of the curve. And don't get discouraged. I'm not going to play this YouTube video, but he basically talks about how programmers are stupid. There's this thing called the Dunningkruger Effect, where you know nothing and you kind of go up the slope. You kind of go up here and you start learning, and you're like, cool, I could do this. I can write, and like, maybe you wrote your first game here or something like that. Like an app or something, release that, and you're like, yeah, I'm doing great. And then you get into the industry, and then it's like, oh, you're starting work on consoles, and then you got to learn how hardware works, and then you learn about cache coherency on the CPU, and these things you never even thought about, and you kind of fall into this valley where you're like, oh my god, I'm dumb, everybody's so much smarter at me than me, and you're just like, how am I ever going to make it through this? Like, like, I shouldn't be here, this sort of thing, right? And this is only after like decades, or like, I don't want to say decades, but like years, you slowly start climbing up. Like, don't get discouraged. Everybody does this. If you're talking to somebody who's been working in the game industry for 15 years, they sound like a god because they've gone through this. And then you kind of run into this thing called imposter syndrome, where you're kind of like, I'm not good enough. Like, there you'll see a job posting and be like, I'm not good enough for this. Like, I don't know enough. But you are, most of the time you are. So don't not apply for things, like try your best. And honestly, I 100% suffered from imposter syndrome. When I was working at Gameloft, I got a recruiter email from Unity, and they're like, oh, hey, do you want to like work on this thing? We have all this cool stuff. And I was like, Unity. I'm like, yeah, right. Me working at Unity, there's no way. I'm like, okay, whatever. And then I ignored them for a month. And every week they'd send a new email. And then finally, after a fourth email, I was like, look, I'm flattered. You guys would be awesome to work for, but I'm honestly don't really want to, like, you start making up excuses. Like, I don't want to move to Montreal. And they email me back and say, oh, that's fine. I talked to the manager and he says, that's fine. You can work from home. I'm like, what? I'm like, I guess there's no reason not to take this call. And the rest is history. And now I work at Unity, so it's awesome. It kind of feels like a university again, because we're not so much in the game making business. We're kind of in like the technology and like customer service business. We get to work on all these cool things and file patents. I think I have my name on a provisional patent right now, so someday I might have my name on a patent. They get to do research on all these cool things, emerging technologies, like I said, AI, machine learning, really interesting stuff. We get to work with clients from a bunch of different places. Because we're a game engine, we're actually like, we have our hands in like with automotive and film, and there's games, and there's probably some stuff to do with the health stuff. And I wish I could talk more about this, but it's kind of like a secret project that hasn't really been announced yet. One of the guys that my boss's boss now is Peter Moore, which I don't know if any of you guys are familiar with him, but he was the CEO of the Liverpool Football Club. He worked for Sega and EA and Xbox, launching the Xbox. And now he's the head of our secret project. And like I said, Unity has done a lot of stuff in movies. So this is my boss here, Adam Myhill. and he does a lot of stuff in film, and he worked for EA as well, and he worked with Disney. I'm pretty sure it was Disney or Pixar, to make this TV show, Baymax. And basically, what he said is just working in Unity like the Disney studio making this says it cut their production time in half, because they could just take a dial and change the color and it just changes the color in the whole TV show. Or if they wanted to, they have automatic camera systems. If they wanted a character to come in from the right, they can make it come to the right without having to redo the whole camera system, because often you'd have to animate it by hand. It's like, oh, it doesn't look right when he comes in from right. How do we make them come in from left? And like, oh yeah, that looks way better. And it's just like, you're done. And they won an Emmy for that, which is super cool. I think I'm getting towards the end. Okay. Yeah. So that's basically my life in a nutshell, the past like decade or so. So I just want to talk about how I'm coping with the pandemic. So this is me like 3 months in, passed out on stream with my friends on Zoom. I think we were chatting till like 3 o'clock in the morning, and my friend sends me this the next day. Me falling asleep on stream. And one of the best things that ever happened to me in the past year and a half was I bought a VR headset, which I 100% recommend to anybody who has the cash for it. Maybe not an Index. You could probably get like a Quest or Quest 2. But yeah, if you can't go out into the world, bring the world to you, right? So some people might laugh at this, but I started learning new stuff. I played VR chat, which is probably not the most healthy place to be in, but there's a really, really nice community in there where you could learn sign language. Because just because it's called VR chat doesn't mean everybody can talk. There's a lot of deaf and mute people inside the community, and they've built this community where you could go learn, and you could actually use your hands, use the controllers, and do sign language. So this guy here, Crow7, he's actually like, I think he was born deaf, and he's one of the first deaf esports like players, I guess. He played on the Overwatch team, and now he's part of this community, and there's a bunch of deaf people who actually hold classes, and he's one of the instructors and teaches you how to do sign language. So learn a new skill, do some sign language. It's lots of fun. I started doing some modeling using Blender, which really helps out, because if you want to play VR chat, you can make your own models. And it uses Unity, so you can learn Unity at the same time and make your own content. You can make your own worlds and upload that and share that with your friends. And honestly, I'm just trying to do my best with everything. I still have Discord video calls with my friends, sometimes way too late, not to the point where I pass out anymore. But we still play games. I play a lot of Overwatch with them. Do some exercise. Go out, go for some walks. Play some Beat Saber if you ever get that VR headset. And just try to make your workspace as comfortable as you can. I bought a new computer. You could get a new desk. I have a green screen behind me just for laughs, I guess. And yeah, I guess that's the end of my presentation, unless you guys have any questions. I think I actually kind of hit a good mark.
Yeah, no, that was a perfect time. What is Beat Saber? That came up, and I'm not familiar with it.
You may or may not have seen some clips online, but basically you have two lightsabers, and it's kind of like a rhythm game where cubes will come at you, and then you got to slice them in a certain way to the rhythm, and you end up moving your body around a lot, and it's exhausting. Like, you actually build up like quite a sweat. It's lots of fun at the same time.
Sounds cool. Thanks.
So I don't see any other questions in the chat, but does anyone else want to jump in with something?
I was, if no one else has one, I was interested. How was it working with Johnny Depp on that game?
It's not so much working with him. It's us working through, like, Disney working through him. And I don't know how much I could say, but he was going through his divorce at the time, and it actually tied our game up for like a month because
Oh,
we couldn't get him to sign off because he owns that. It was part of like the legal hearings. And it's a mess.
oh.
Honestly, it's more of a hassle than than you think.
Yeah, I sort of figured that there would be some some interruptions with working with like really any celebrity.
Like, one funny thing with the Lego games is that they have a bunch of different departments. So like for all their city sets and city minifigures, they have a team that handles that. They have one for like Ninjago and stuff like that. And the city team said your characters can't physically hit each other. Like, our characters can't physically hit each other. So it's like, okay, cool. How do we work around this now? Our game's a fighting game. So it's just challenging all around.
So how do you end up working around that?
Uh, all their attacks are projectiles. Like, one guy
Ah,
throws an egg, or like sprays some water and stuff like that. If you ever play it, that's why. All right. Any more questions?
Looks like no for the time being. So why don't we thank Andy, at least in the virtual applause sense, or unmute, and thanks a lot. Really great.
All right. Yeah. If you have any more questions, like, feel free to reach out.
That was
Great.
great. Thanks, Andy.
Awesome.
thanks, Andy.
All right. Have a good day, everyone, I guess.
Bye.